Layla and Majnun is a love story that originated as poem in 11th century Arabia. Later was adopted by the Persian poet Nizami Ganjavi, who also wrote Khosrow and Shirin. It is the third of his 5 long narrative poems. Khamsa Qays and Layla fall in love with each other when they are young, but when they grow up, Layla's father doesn't allow them to be together. Qays becomes obsessed with her, and the community gives him the epithet Majnun, the same epithet given to the semi-historical character Qays ibn al-Mulawwah of the Banu Amir tribe. Long before Nizami, the legends circulated in anecdotal forms in Arabic Akbar. The early anecdotes and oral reports about Majnun are documented in Kitab al-Aghani and Ibn Kitabaz al-Shir wal-Shu'ara. The anecdotes are mostly very short, only loosely connected, and show little or no plot development. Many imitations have been contrived of Nizami's work, several of which are original literary works in their own right, including Amir Khosrow Majnun Layla and Jami's version, completed in 1484, amounts to 3,860 couplets. Other notable reworkings are by Maktabi Shirazi, Hatfi, and Fuzuli, which became popular in Ottoman Turkey and India. Sir William Jones published Hatfi's romance in Calcutta in 1788. The popularity of the romance following Nizami's version is also evident from the references to it in lyrical poetry and mystical mathnavis before the appearance of Nizami's romance. There are just some allusions to Layla and Majnun in divans. The number and variety of anecdotes about the lovers also increased considerably from the 12th century onwards. Mystics contrived many stories about Majnun to illustrate technical mystical concepts such as fana, divanagi, self-sacrifice, etc. Nizami's work has been translated into many languages. Story: Qays ibn al-Mulawwah fell in love with Layla. He soon began composing poems about his love for her, mentioning her name often. His unself-conscious efforts to woo the girl caused some locals to call him Majnun. When he asked for her hand in marriage, her father refused because it would be a scandal for Layla to marry someone considered mentally unbalanced. Soon after, Layla was married to another noble and rich merchant belonging to the Thaqif tribe in Taif. He was described as a handsome man with reddish complexion whose name was Ward al-Kafi. The Arabs called him Ward, meaning rose, in Arabic. When Majnun heard of her marriage, he fled the tribal camp and began wandering the surrounding desert. His family eventually gave up hope for his return and left food for him in the wilderness. He could sometimes be seen reciting poetry to himself or writing in the sand with a stick. Layla is generally depicted as having moved to a place in northern Arabia with her husband, where she became ill and eventually died. In some versions, Layla dies of heartbreak from not being able to see her would-be lover. Majnun was later found dead in the wilderness in 688 AD, near Layla's grave. He had carved 3 verses of poetry on a rock near the grave, which are the last 3 verses attributed to him. Many other minor incidents happened between his madness and his death. Most of his recorded poetry was composed before his descent into madness. It is a tragic story of undying love, much like the later Romeo and Juliet. This type of love is known as virgin love because the lovers never marry or consummate the passion. Other famous virgin love stories set in Arabia are the stories of Qays and Lubna, Khaldir and Azar, Marwa and al-Majnun, al-Faransi, Antara and Abla, and Irfan and Zubi. This literary motif is common throughout the world, notably in the Muslim literature of South Asia, such as Urdu ghazals. History and influence. Persian adaptation and Persian literature. The story of Layla and Majnun was known in Persian as early as the 9th century. Two well-known Persian poets, Rudaki and Barbutar, both mention the lovers. Although the story was somewhat popular in Persian literature in the 12th century, it was the Azeri masterpiece of Nizami Ganjavi that popularized it dramatically in Persian literature. Nizami collected both secular and mystical sources about Majnun and portrayed a vivid picture of the famous lovers. Subsequently, many other Persian poets imitated him and wrote their own versions of the romance. Nizami drew influence from outright love poetry, which is characterized by erotic abandon and attraction to the beloved, often by means of an unfulfillable longing. Other influences include older Persian epics, such as Vamik-u-Adra, written in the 11th century, which covers a similar topic of a virgin and her passionate lover, the latter having to go through many trials to be with his love. In his adaptation, the young lovers become acquainted at school and fell desperately in love. However, they could not see each other due to a family feud, and Layla's family arranged for her to marry another man. According to Dr. Rudolf Jelpke, many later poets have imitated Nizami's work, even if they could not equal and certainly not surpass it. Persians, Turks, Indians, to name only the most important ones. The Persian scholar Hekmat has listed no less than 40 Persians and 13 Turkish versions of Layla and Majnun. Quote, according to Vahid Dastgadi, if one would search all existing libraries, one would probably find more than 1,000 versions of Layla and Majnun. In his statistical survey of famous Persian romances, Asand al-Fakhari enumerates 59 imitations of Layla and Majnun as the most popular romance in the Iranian world, followed by 51 versions of Khosrow and Shirin, 22 variants of Yusuf Ozlika and 16 versions of Vamik-u-Adra. Azerbaijani adaptation and Azerbaijani literature. The story of Layla and Majnun passed into Azerbaijani literature. The Azerbaijani language adaptation of the story, Dastan-i Layla Majnun, was written in the 16th century by Fuzuli and Hagiri Tabrizi. Fuzuli's version was borrowed by the renowned Azerbaijani composer, Uzeyir Hajibiyot, who used the material to create what became the Middle East's first opera. It premiered in Baku on the 25th of January 1908. The story had previously been brought to the stage in the late 19th century, when Ahmed Shawki wrote a poetic play about the tragedy, now considered one of the best in modern Arab poetry. Majnun lines from the play are sometimes confused with his actual poems. A scene of the poem is depicted on the reverse of the Azerbaijani 150 manat commemorative coins minted in 1996 for the 500th anniversary of Fuzuli's life and activities. Other influences. The enduring popularity of the legend has influenced Middle Eastern literature, especially Sufi writers, in whose literature the name Layla refers to the concept of the beloved. The original story is featured in Baha'u'llah's mystical writings, the Seven Vallis. In Arabic language, Layla name means night, and is thought to mean one who works by night. Quote, this is an apparent allusion to the fact that the romance of the star-crossed lovers was hidden and kept secret. In the Arabic language, the word Majnun means a crazy person. Quote, in addition to this creative use of language, the tale has also made at least one linguistic contribution, inspiring a Turkish colloquialism. To feel like Majnun is to feel completely possessed, as might be expected of a person who is literally madly in love. This epic poem was translated into English by Isaac Disraeli in the early 19th century, allowing a wider audience to appreciate it. Layla has also been mentioned mentioned in many works by Aleister Crowley in many of his religious texts, perhaps most notably in the Book of Lies. In India, it is believed that Layla and Majnun found refuge in a village in Rajasthan before they died. The graves of Layla and Majnun are believed to be located in the Bainur village near Anupgarh in the Sri Ganganagar district. According to rural legend, that Layla and Majnun escaped to these parts and died there. Hundreds of newlyweds and lovers from India and Pakistan, despite there being no facilities for an overnight stay, attend the two-day fair in June. Another variation on the tale tells of Layla and Majnun meeting in school. Majnun fell in love with Layla and was captivated by her. The schoolmaster would beat Majnun for paying attention to Layla instead of his school work. However, upon some sort of magic, whenever Majnun was beaten, Layla would bleed for his wounds. The families learnt of this strange magic and began to feud, preventing Layla and Majnun from seeing each other. They meet again later in the youth and Majnun wishes to marry Layla. Layla's brother, Tabrez, would not let her shame the family name by marrying Majnun. Tabrez and Majnun quarreled and, stricken with madness over Layla, Majnun murdered Tabrez. Word reached the village and Majnun was arrested. He was sentenced to be stoned to death by the villagers. Layla could not bear it and agreed to marry another man if Majnun would be kept safe from harm in exile. Her terms were accepted and Layla got married, but her heart still longed for Majnun. Hearing this, Layla's husband rode with his men into the desert to find Majnun. Upon finding him, Layla's husband challenged Majnun to the death. The instant her husband's sword pierced Majnun's heart, Layla collapsed in her home. Layla and Majnun were buried next to each other as her husband and the fathers prayed to their afterlife. Myth has it that Layla and Majnun met again in heaven, where they loved forever. Popular culture. The tale and the name Layla served as Eric Clapton's inspiration for the title of Derek and the Dominoes' famous album Layla and Other Assorted Love Songs and its title track in 1971. The song, "I'm Yours," is a direct quote from a passage in Layla and Majnun. The tale served as the inspiration for Halim El-Dab's early electronic tape music composition, called Layla and the Poet in 1959. The tale of Layla and Majnun has been the subject of various films produced by the Indian film industry beginning in the 1920s. A list may be found here. http://thehindu.com/features/cinema/article 419176.is. 1. Layla Majnu was produced in 1976. In 2007, the story was enacted as both a framing story and as a dance within a movie in the film Arja Nashla. Also, in pre-independence India, the first Pashto-language film was an adaptation of this story. The term Layla Majnun is often used for lovers. Also, Majnun is commonly used to address a person madly in love. Orhan Pamuk makes frequent reference to Layla and Majnun in his novels, The Museum of Innocence and My Name is Red. One of the panels in the Alish and Navoy metro station in Tashkent and Nizami Ganjavi metro station in Baku represents the epic on blue-green tiles. In the book A Thousand Splendid Suns by Afghan author Khaled Hosseini, Rashid often refers to Layla and Tariq as Layla and Majnun. South African author Ahmed Dangra of mixed Indian descent makes reference to Layla and Majnun in his novels, Waiting for Layla and Kafka's Curse. On Gaia Online, a recent monthly collectible released an item under the names Majnun and Layla loosely based on the story. Layla and Majnun, poem of Alish and Navoy. Layla and Majnun, poem of Jamie. Layla and Majnun, poem of Nizami Ganjavi. Layla and Majnun, poem of Fuzuli. Layla and Majnun, poem of Hagiri Tabrizi. Layla and Majnun, drama in verse of Mirza Hadi Raswa. Layla and Majnun, novel of Nekati. Layla and Majnun, the first Muslim and the Azerbaijani opera of Uzayir Hajibiyot. Layla and Majnun, symphonic poem of Garagayev. Symphony 24, Opus 273, for tenor solo, trumpet, choir and strings, Alan Hovhannes. Layla and Majnun, ballet, staged by Kasyan Goliazovsky. Copyright on Music Sar Balasanyan. The Song of Majnun, opera of Bright Sheng. Layla Majnu, Pakistani film in 1974. Layla Majnu, Indian Hindi silent film in 1922. Layla Majnu, Indian Hindi silent film in 1927. Layla Majnu, Indian Hindi film in 1931. Layla Majnu, Indian Hindi film in 1931. Layla and Majnun, Iranian film in 1936. Layla Majnu, Indian Telugu film in 1949. Layla and Majnun, Tajik Soviet film ballet of 1960. Layla and Majnun, Soviet Azerbaijani film of 1961. Layla Majnu, Indian Malayalam film in 1962. Layla Majnu, Indian Hindi film in 1976. Layla al-Majnun, music album of Orhan Gencebay in 1981. Layla al-Majnun, Turkish drama film in 1982. Love and God, Indian Hindi film directed by K. Asif. Layla and Majnun, Azerbaijani film opera of 1996. Arja Nashla, a 2007 Indian film, has a 15-minute musical play on life of Layla and Majnun. Majnun Layla, a 2010 song by Syrian-American hip-hop artist and peace activist Omar Efendim. Layla al-Majnun is a Turkish television comedy series in 2011. Habibi is a 2011 film by Susan Youssef filmed in the Gaza Strip. Double Barrel is a Malayalam movie in 2015. Tamasha is a Hindi movie of 2015. A musical story in this movie has parts of Layla Majnu duet. Layla the Musical, British theatre production by Rifco Arts, Watford Palace Theatre and Queen's Theatre. Hornchurch toured England during 2016.